Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going to be looking into something a little bit different.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a single source.
Okay.
It's a first-hand account from a woman who had a rather unsettling experience after moving to a new town near Denver. And it's kind of like we're reading her diary online almost.
I see.
Full of these strange encounters, this creeping sense of unease.
Yeah.
So here goes the story. I moved to a neighborhood in a small town north of Denver about a year ago. I had just gone through a pretty nasty divorce at the time, and I needed a house small enough that I could afford on a single salary, and that was far enough away from my ex's family that they wouldn't come around bothering me. The house itself was an 1,100 square foot little bungalow, and it was the last house on the block before it turned into a dead end. Beyond that was a small forested area, densely packed with trees, but still not fully concealing the sounds and lights of the expressway. My neighbors were a mix of young families and retirees, and I had no issues with any of them. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after moving in, I was unpacking the last of my boxes and trying to figure out the inner workings of my new steam cleaner when there was a knock on my door. Sweating, and with a homely bun on top of my head, I opened the door to see my neighbor, Sarah, smiling warmly and elegantly. She held the stems of 2 wine glasses between the fingers of one hand. In her other hand, a bottle of white wine. Sarah and I had hit it off the first day I moved in. She was sweet and hilarious. I welcomed her in, but we eventually settled into 2 folding chairs on the front porch, drinking wine and chatting about nothing of significance. Halfway through the bottle of wine, Sarah cleared her throat and mindfully crossed her legs into a crisscross position, rotating slightly more towards me. She smiled at me sympathetically, and it caught me a bit off guard. Laughing softly and awkwardly, I asked her what she was thinking. I'm really hoping someone's told you already, because if not, I have to tell you. And she trailed off, laughing uncomfortably and tucking her hair behind her ear. She stared at her hands for a moment. What are you talking about? An irrational thought that it had something to do with my ex intruded my mental space, and my heart began hammering in my chest as I fought to keep Sarah's gaze. Has anyone said anything to you about the knocking at night? Anyone from the HOA or another neighbor? And no. Knocking? I stammered, feeling a little tipsier than I'd planned to and swiveling a bit towards Sarah. It wouldn't have started yet, but soon. People have been knocking on our doors late at night. Every night. Who? She shrugged, meeting my eyes with another sympathetic look. I mean, are they doing anything malicious? No, she said, keeping the shape from the word on her lips for a few seconds and avoiding my eyes. No, nothing like that. I guess they're stories? Like poems, riddles, confessions. Sarah, what the hell? I laughed, truly feeling that she was messing with me. People are just opening their doors late at night, all willy-nilly, and just listening to these random ass people's stories. Okay, thank you for the heads up. No, I know how it sounds. I really do. And if you don't believe it, okay. But I wanted to tell you because when you hear the knocking, probably tonight, you shouldn't ignore it. You have answer, and you have to listen. Okay? You listen until they're done, no matter what they say. Sarah was expressionless. I could see clearly that she was in fact not being mischievous and silly, and she was not amused by her account of the knocking. I began to consider that she may have had a mental difference and was experiencing a delusion or something similar. But I could feel that it was real to her. Okay, Sarah. I'm sorry I laughed, and I hear you. She nodded and patted my knee softly, stood up, and said she was headed home. My eyes wide in disbelief. I got up quickly and walked into my house as Sarah walked away towards her own, neither of us caring to retrieve the empty wine bottle or glasses. I spent the rest of the evening stepping over boxes instead of moving them, snacking on various items straight out grocery bags, and watching true crime documentaries on YouTube. Halfway through a Dahmer body language analysis, I heard a soft rap on my front door, and my bloodstream filled with a moderate amount of adrenaline. No way, no way, no freaking way. I said aloud to nobody at all, hobbling over to the front door with my left foot asleep. I looked through the small window on the front door and saw a relatively small and normal-looking old woman peering back at me. She wore a lilac sweater and pearls around her neck. I opened the door, frustrated but curious. Hello. Hello, Mississippi, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm sure you feel this is a bit unorthodox, but it happens to be time for our visit if you'll have me. I was about to have a heart attack. The lady herself was totally non-threatening, but the circumstances had me feeling a strange numbness and shock about the situation. Had I moved into the neighborhood of a cult? Maybe it was a crazy tradition, but Sarah hadn't spoken about it the lovingly, slightly embarrassed way you might expect someone to talk about their weird hometown traditions. She was somber. I'm not dressed, but I can listen from here. The lady nodded politely and began. I've written you a poem. She looked quickly up at me with a girlish smile of pride. She reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper. I nodded, trying to hide my anxiety and impatience. A small undertaking grows greater when idleness feeds the weight of later. Each moment passes, a silent loss, stealing time. What is the cost? The woman peered past me into my living room, her gaze meeting a sack of boxes piled next to my coffee table covered in grocery bags and open snack containers. Sorry, just moved in. I said, smiling. 5 days ago, dear. Are you finished? I asked, no longer hiding my irritation. She nodded, her eyes meeting mine with what seemed like authority. I closed and locked the door, turning towards my living room and feeling the hot sting of anger and insecurity rise up my spine. I wasn't offended by the old lady's judgment, but triggered by it. Nolan used to walk in the front door, scan the house, and berate me for every unfinished chore. Lousy bitch. Sad excuse for a woman. The little mantra of he can't hurt you anymore doesn't do much for the deep-seated learned belief that those things are, in fact, true. It didn't matter if he wasn't here to think these things about me. I believe them now. I fell asleep the same way I spent the day. On my couch surrounded by snacks and boxes with YouTube's algorithm crafting me an ongoing cocktail of educational and disturbing entertainment. I wasn't a procrastinator. Objectively, I was probably going through the natural ups and downs that come with moving. What I was, however, was extremely well versed in self-sabotage. If Nolan and that nosy old lady thought I was too messy, taking too long to unpack, I would be the messiest bitch they'd ever seen. I'd live out of these boxes forever. I spitefully moved through the house the following morning, no longer stepping over boxes, but forcefully pushing them out of the way with my feet. I think I'll spend time in the garden today. So I spent the entire day doing yard work. I pulled weeds. I swept away the gritty powder of leaves that fall left behind on my driveway. I pondered watering the grass, wanting to make the rest of the lawn more even with a large, much greener and healthier looking patch near the back gate. But it was becoming too cold, and it might all be different come spring. I worked all day because I wasn't going to unpack the boxes, and I didn't want to think about the next nighttime visitor. One knock, one poem from a frail old woman, and I was officially spiraling. I was fighting the delusion that these visitors had something to do with Nolan. I knew it couldn't be, and I yanked that belief out of my mind with every weed I pulled until my arms ached and sweat stung my eyes. Weird West Coast hazing bullshit. I finally came inside to shower and eat. I opened a fifth of whiskey I'd gotten as a moving-in gift, downed half, and crashed on the couch. Boxes untouched. Dahmer's droning Midwest accent playing over the silence, and container of spinach dip starting to smell sour. But the yard looked fantastic, and the rest of the lawn would catch up to that beautiful emerald green patch someday. Around 1 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Expected, but startling nonetheless. I got up slowly, the liquor sloshing in my stomach. So quickly accumulated that it didn't even have a chance to disperse. Again, I looked through the window first, squinting nauseously against the front porch light. The damn wine glasses and bottle are still there. Standing on my porch, slightly more intimidating than the nosy old hag, was a young man who looked to be about 25. He was fit and tall and clasped his hands behind his back like a business grad at a job fair. As I opened the door, he moved a few strands of his dark hair away from his eyes and gave me a friendly-looking smile. Mum. He spoke in a lilted voice. Being half drunk, half sick, and half asleep, I skipped the pleasantries and gestured for him to share his story. He unfolded a perfectly neat piece of paper, looking a bit embarrassed and eager. I almost kind of liked him. A riddle. It's a riddle, he said, looking up at me and back down at the paper a couple of times. I offer you escape when you feel pain. I leave you empty, but you come back again. What am I? I squinted my eyes at him, unsure of how to read him, and unsure whether he was reading me. Jameson, apparently. I said. I don't remember the moment his smile went from nervous and friendly to full-blown contempt, but I felt it in my chest. It smells as if that's the case. He spoke, his voice flat and disgusted. I slammed and locked the door, cursing the man and stomping back to my place on the couch. But I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with flashbacks of drunken fights and broken bottles. A sinking feeling of shame pulled me down and exasperated my nausea. How many sick days did you use for no reason other than being hungover? That was when I first left Nolan. I was just trying to survive. I drowned my thoughts with the remainder of the fifth. The following afternoon, I awoke to a pounding headache and an extreme case of agitation. The ice machine sound was an ice pick in my temple, and the heat was up too high. I'd had enough of my own shit and pulled myself off the couch, opened every window, and clung desperately to Tylenol and Gatorade as I finally unpacked every box and cleaned the house. I was sick and sluggish. My insecurities were burning on the surface of my skin, and my anxiety was screeching in my mind. But I pulled through and made the house look a little more like home. I traded the true crime videos for an exceedingly more wholesome Bob's Burgers and repeated the mantras my old therapist had equipped me with. I am enough as I am. Their words are a reflection of them, not me. I took a break to make a cup of tea and stared out the kitchen window into my backyard. A growing sense of pride filled heart that the house was becoming as beautiful as its outdoor counterpart. I cocked my head, again noticing the lawn. How is that damn patch even greener yet? Why is the rest browning so fast? It's no less than 40 degrees. I trust that everything will fall into place in time. Midnight was upon me in no time, and I tucked myself into my little bed on the couch, stretching my legs out and embracing comfort and rest. I felt more at peace with myself and my home. Just as I began to nod off, I heard the inevitable knock on my front door. The whole thing was getting old, but I wasn't going to let it get me upset again. I set an intention to treat whoever the visitor would be with kindness. I didn't understand or agree with this ritual, but I lived here now. I wouldn't take it personally, and I would respectfully listen and go back to sleep. I opened the door gently, peering at my visitor with curiosity. Black hair, blue eyes, collared shirt. My heart hammered in my chest, and the sickening familiar sense of floating invaded my body. Something between vertigo and the seventh layer of hell. I knew it wasn't actually Nolan. But damn, he looked a lot like him, and PTSD is one hell of a trip. My mouth went dry, and I held onto the door frame aggressively. I nodded with everything I had left in me, urging the man to tell his story. Hi, I know it's extra late. I'm sorry. This whole thing is a little silly, right? He said, sensing my discomfort and smiling sympathetically. It's okay. Want to come sit? Here on the porch? You seem very tired. He gestured gently towards the chairs and the table that still held the wine bottle and glasses. I'm sorry, I forgot again. No, it's fine. I can stand here. I said, great, okay. I have a confession, but that feels a bit heavy, so I'm going to make it into a game. Cool. He seemed perfectly kind, but I felt half dead in my body and I wasn't interested in playing along. I nodded nonetheless. Okay, I start with a sentence or two, and you finish it. I actively pressed into the four corners of my feet like that yoga teacher taught me. Okay. When I feel overwhelmed, I like to dash. Cry. He chuckled warmly. Okay, nice one. Okay. It's only fair for abusers to be dash. Held accountable. Right? Can't argue with that. You're doing great. Even at the expense of dash. A cringe-inducing ringing in my ears nearly put me on the floor. What is this? Can you just tell me your thing? I'm not feeling well. Please. Okay, no worries. That's a tough one. Last one. And it's just like a little poem, okay? You'll like it. Slow, deep breaths. I did the best I could with what I had. His transgressions running around in my head. I'm a mangled mess of the words he said. Tear-stained cheeks and eyes stained red. He can't be stopped, so he has to be dash. I gathered every bit of power. I had to slam the front door shut, but the man blocked it with both hands, pushing firmly and gritting his teeth. He has to be dash. He shrieked, eyes bulging as his 2 hands countered the force of my entire body on the door. Finish it, damn it, and be done with it. You need to let this go. Dead. I screamed, my voice breaking and threatening to tear my throat. Dead. He had to be dead. He couldn't be stopped, so he had to be dead. It was him or me. You don't understand. I sobbed and slid down the door to the cold ground, rounding my body into a ball. I don't know when the man left. I don't know how long I lay on the wood floor with the front door wide open. And I don't know how long it'll be until they take me away. I'm staring out my kitchen window, smoking a cigarette. I don't remember where the greener patch of grass was. It's all covered in snow.
So picture this, you've just gone through a divorce.
Okay.
You're looking for a fresh start.
Right.
You find this charming bungalow in a peaceful town. It seems peaceful, at least.
Yeah.
There's families and retirees.
Sounds nice.
Yeah. But things aren't exactly as they seem.
Of course not.
So what's so captivating about this story is that it really juxtaposes the ordinary with the eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're right there with her, unpacking boxes, getting to know the neighbors.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, bam, we're hit with this unsettling undercurrent.
Oh, yeah, like a sense of dread.
Yeah, exactly. And at first, everything seems normal.
Okay.
She meets this friendly neighbor, Sarah, and Sarah even offers her a glass of wine.
Oh, nice.
But then Sarah casually mentions these late-night knocks on the door.
Late-night knocks?
Yeah, and she's like, oh, they're not threatening or anything, but you have to.
You have to.
You have to listen.
Interesting.
It's like this unspoken rule of the neighborhood.
Okay, so what do you make of that from a psychological perspective?
Well, it introduces this element of compulsion, this ritual. It hints at a community that's maybe a little too tightly knit. Like deviation from the norm is not tolerated.
Yeah, I see.
And for someone like our protagonist, you know, feeling vulnerable out of place, this could be particularly unnerving.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a subtle form of social pressure.
Right.
Right, and it really makes you wonder what happens if you don't answer the door.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, but then we meet the first visitor.
Okay.
Things get weirder.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's an elderly woman.
Okay.
Who recites a poem about unpacked boxes.
About unpacked boxes.
Yeah. I know on the surface it seems almost comical.
Yeah.
But there's this underlying creepiness to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So what makes it so unsettling is the specificity of it.
Right.
It suggests that these visitors are observing her, taking note of her personal life. And remember, she's already feeling judged, insecure after her divorce.
Yeah.
And this just amplifies those feelings. Awesome. It makes her question whether she belongs in this community.
Totally, I see that.
Yeah, and I can see how that would play on her anxieties.
Yeah.
She's trying to create this new life for herself.
Yeah, a fresh start.
But it's like the past is clinging to her.
Yeah.
It's symbolized by those unpacked boxes.
Interesting.
And it makes me wonder, is the poem meant to be a welcome, a warning, or something else entirely?
It's very ambiguous.
And that ambiguity is what keeps us hooked.
For sure.
Right? Is this a bizarre tradition or something more sinister?
Right.
The story doesn't give us any easy answers, and it forces us to confront that same uncertainty that our protagonist is experiencing.
I see.
And then we have the second visitor, a young man who arrives with a riddle about escapism.
A riddle.
Yeah, and it seems harmless enough at first.
Okay.
But her response blurting out Jameson completely changes the dynamic.
Jameson.
Yeah, and suddenly he's judgmental, almost disgusted.
Oh, wow.
It's like she's failed some unspoken test.
Interesting.
So it's fascinating how this seemingly innocent encounter triggers such a strong reaction.
Yeah.
Both from the visitor and from our protagonist. And the riddle itself could be interpreted as a commentary on her reliance on alcohol. something she's clearly struggling with.
Yeah, and the way he reacts, it's like he's confirming her deepest fears about herself.
Right.
That she's flawed, that she can't escape her past.
Mm-hmm. And this interaction seems to push her further into self-sabotage.
Oh, no.
It's almost as if she's fulfilling the very prophecy in the riddle.
Oh, yeah, like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. And we see this play out in her behavior afterwards.
Right.
She spirals, seeking solace in alcohol, reinforcing that cycle of self-destruction.
Yeah, it's like she's trapped in this feedback loop.
Right.
Both internally with her own struggles and externally with this strange neighborhood ritual.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking because she clearly wants to break free from these patterns.
Right.
But it's like she's almost drawn to them.
Yeah, I see that.
And then we see her trying to regain control. Cleaning, tending to her yard, focusing on something positive.
Good.
But even then, she becomes fixated on this patch of green lawn amidst the browning grass.
A green patch of lawn. What do you think that symbolizes?
That's an interesting question. I think it could symbolize her longing for order and beauty. This desperate attempt to find something positive amidst the chaos.
Okay, yeah.
But perhaps it's a sign of her growing obsession.
Right.
A way of focusing her anxieties on something tangible.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards the obsession angle.
Yeah.
It's like she's grasping at straws, trying to find meaning in something as simple as a patch of grass. But of course, the story doesn't let us dwell on that for too long.
Oh, no.
Because then we're hit with the arrival of the third visitor.
And this is where things take a truly disturbing turn.
Yeah.
This visitor resembles her ex-husband.
Right.
A figure who clearly represents trauma and pain in her life.
Yes.
Not only that, he introduces this confession game.
Right.
Which feels like a deliberate attempt to force her to confront her deepest fears and vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's like he's poking at an open wound.
Oof.
Forcing her to relive the very pain she's trying to escape.
Right.
And the prompts he gives her, they're so specific.
Yeah.
So unsettling.
It's creepy.
It's as if he knows her deepest secrets, her most shameful thoughts.
Right.
It's hard to believe that this is just a harmless tradition at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
Something else is going on.
Definitely something more is going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he's weaponizing her past against her, using her vulnerabilities to manipulate and control her. And the fact that he resembles her ex-husband adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
It really blurs the lines between reality and her own internal fears. Is this a real person or a manifestation of her trauma?
It's the question that keeps gnawing at me. Is this a collective delusion, a town full of people playing these mind games? Or is there something more sinister at play?
Ooh.
Something preying on her vulnerabilities?
That's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
To think that this seemingly idyllic community could be a breeding ground for such psychological manipulation.
Right.
And the fact that she's new to town, still trying to find her footing, makes her even more susceptible to this kind of pressure.
It's like she's walking a tightrope trying to balance her desire to fit in with her growing sense of unease. And this confession game, with its increasingly personal and unsettling prompts, pushes her closer and closer to the edge.
And remember, we're seeing all of this through the lens of her perception.
Right.
We don't have access to the thoughts or motivations of the other characters.
Right.
This raises the question of the unreliable narrator. Is she accurately portraying events? Or is her own trauma coloring her interpretation?
That's what makes this story so compelling. It forces us to question everything we're seeing and hearing.
Right.
We're left to grapple with the same ambiguity and uncertainty that she's experiencing.
No.
And as the prompts in the confession game become more intense, her emotional state deteriorates even further.
So the prompts themselves are really fascinating.
Okay.
They tap into universal fears and insecurities, guilt, shame, the fear of being judged.
Right.
It's as if the game is designed to exploit these vulnerabilities, to break down her defenses and expose her raw emotions.
And it works. We see her spiral further into despair, questioning her own sanity and her place in this community.
Oh, no.
And it all culminates in that final explosive outburst where she screams, "Dead!" That word just hangs in the air, charged with so much raw emotion.
Yeah. What do you think was going through her mind in that moment?
It's a moment of utter desperation, a breaking point where she can no longer contain the fear, the anger and the pain that have been building up inside her, and the word dead could represent a multitude of things. The death of her hopes for a fresh start, the death of her innocence, or perhaps even a symbolic death of her old self.
Yeah.
It's like she's reached a point of no return.
Right.
And then we're left with this ambiguous ending, the snowfalls blanketing the neighborhood in white, obscuring that patch of green lawn that had become such a focal point for her.
Right.
And we don't know what happens to her, whether she finds peace or succumbs to the darkness that seems to be closing in.
So the snow serves as a powerful metaphor.
Okay.
It represents a blank slate, a covering over of what came before.
Yeah.
But it also creates this sense of isolation, of being lost and alone. And the fact that she can no longer locate the green patch of lawn is significant. It could suggest that her obsession has faded, replaced by a sense of resignation, or perhaps even acceptance.
Or maybe it's been buried, hidden beneath the surface, just like the secrets and anxieties that haunt this community. It's as if the story is mirroring her own state of mind.
Yeah.
Confused, uncertain, grappling with the aftermath of this traumatic experience.
And that ambiguity is what makes this ending so unsettling.
Right.
We're left to fill in the blanks to imagine what becomes of her and this strange town.
Yeah.
It's like the story is inviting us to confront our own fears about the unknown, about the hidden forces that might be shaping our lives in ways we don't fully understand.
It's also a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling stories are those that leave us with more questions than answers.
Right.
They force us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to acknowledge the complexities of human experience.
Exactly. This story isn't just about one woman's unsettling experience.
Right.
It's a reflection of our collective anxieties, about isolation, conformity, and the loss of control.
Yeah.
It taps into our primal fears about the unknown, the things that lurk just beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary lives.
It makes you wonder what other secrets are hidden behind those closed doors beneath that blanket of snow. It's a chilling thought and one that stays with you long after you finish reading, but I think there's more to unpack here. This story isn't just about fear and uncertainty.
Right.
It's also about resilience, about the human capacity to confront our demons and find a way forward, even in the darkest of times.
That's an insightful observation. Even amidst the despair and ambiguity, there's this flicker of hope. The protagonist's outburst, while unsettling, could also be seen as a moment of catharsis, a release of pent-up emotions that had been poisoning her from within. Perhaps this is the first step towards healing, towards reclaiming her agency and defining her own narrative.
That's a powerful way to look at it. It reminds us that even in the face of trauma and adversity, we have the capacity to choose how we respond, to find strength and meaning, even in the most challenging of circumstances. You know, it's interesting. This story leaves us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle box with missing pieces.
Right.
And we're left to ponder what's real, what's imagined, and what truly lies beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary town.
That's the brilliance of this narrative.
Yeah.
It doesn't spoon-feed us a neat resolution.
Right.
Instead, it invites us to engage with the ambiguity, to grapple with the unsettling possibilities. It's almost as if the author is saying, here's the evidence.
Yeah.
Now you decide what it means.
It reminds me of those optical illusions where you can see two different images depending on how you look at it.
Right.
Is this neighborhood a place of genuine community, albeit with some eccentric traditions?
Right.
Or is it a hotbed of psychological manipulation where newcomers are subtly coerced into conforming, and that duality is reflected in our protagonist's experience?
Yeah.
She's simultaneously drawn to the community and repulsed by it. She craves connection, but fears losing herself in the process.
Yeah.
It's a tension that many of us can relate to, especially in today's world, where social pressures can be so intense.
Absolutely.
I think you've hit on something really important there. This story isn't just a creepy tale about a strange town.
Right.
It's a reflection of our own anxieties about belonging, about the fine line between individuality and conformity.
Absolutely. And it raises questions about the nature of storytelling itself.
Right.
Are we truly objective observers? Or do our own biases and experiences shape the way we interpret events?
Right.
Remember, we're only getting one side of the story here.
We're seeing everything through the protagonist's eyes.
Yeah.
Which makes us complicit in her interpretation. It's like we're right there with her experiencing the same fear, confusion, and ultimately that sense of release when she finally breaks down.
That moment of catharsis is crucial.
Yeah.
It's as if she's purging herself of the accumulated trauma, both from her past and from her experiences in this town.
Right.
But it also raises the question,
yeah,
at what cost?
That's what I keep coming back to. What happens next?
Right.
Does she find a way to heal, to rebuild her life on her own terms?
Yeah.
Or does this outburst mark the beginning of a descent into something even darker?
The story doesn't tell us, and I think that's intentional.
Yeah.
It leaves us with this lingering sense of unease, a feeling that things are unresolved, perhaps even unresolvable.
But I also think there's a glimmer of hope.
Right.
A sense that she's finally taking control of her narrative.
Yeah.
She's no longer passively accepting the strange rituals of this town. She's pushing back, even if it's in a destructive way.
It's a reminder that sometimes we have to break things in order to rebuild them. Her outburst, while unsettling, could also be seen as a declaration of independence.
Okay.
A refusal to be defined by the expectations of others.
So as we reach the end of this deep dive, I'm left with this thought. Maybe the true mystery isn't what's happening in that town,
right,
but what's happening within ourselves. How do we navigate the complexities of community, the pressures to conform, and the need to maintain our own sense of self?
That's a powerful question, and one that each of us must answer for ourselves. This story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that even in the most seemingly idyllic settings, there can be hidden forces at play, both internal and external.
And it challenges us to be critical thinkers, to question the narratives we're presented with, and to trust our own instincts, because sometimes the most unsettling truth is the one we're least willing to face.
Well said.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's the most valuable takeaway from this deep dive. The recognition that even in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity, we have the power to choose our own path, to write our own stories.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought, some new perspectives to consider. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story too. What resonated with you? What questions are you left with? Share your interpretations, and let's continue the conversation until next time. Keep diving deep.